So I think we're gonna start. We already started our conversation. You might have overseen us sitting here and chatting for the past 15 minutes. It's nice to see you here, familiar faces, at least some since yesterday, some since a little bit longer. Let me just open here my little scribblings. We are at day 2. It's going fast, but here we are. At the debate, it already moved, but it will come again. We have this slideshow. I'm just going to signpost this. That's just looping and moving through stills of films that we might see during the festivals, others that we will not see during the festival, but it still were important for us. And us is the 3 of us that are sitting here plus 1. So we came together as the selection committee for the Arquiteturas Film Festival 2025. It's actually the first time that we meet in person for this festival, so we are quite happy about that. And so in the next hour or so, we will kind of reflect a little bit on the discussions that we had. We will share a bit about the selection process. And we view this as kind of an open conversation, so in case you want to join the conversation, feel free to jump in anytime. Silvia also said, grab a chair, come to the stage, so decide what feels good for you. And I think we'll just start by introducing ourselves a little bit. And I want to introduce Isabel to you, Isabel Cristina Carvalho, who is an architect, artist, and researcher here to my right. Porto metropolitan area based. And Cristina has degrees in architecture, town planning, urban design, also in engineering and town management. She holds a PhD in digital media arts from the Universidade Aberta in Lisbon, where she worked specifically on the intersection of people, urban space, and technology through collaborative processes. Currently, she's working as a researcher at CIAC, which is the Research Center for Arts and Communication that's also situated at the Universidade Aberta, and this selection committee is also a collaboration with CIAC, where Silvia is also a part of. Isabel is quite well studied, as you might have gathered so far. And within our group, she was really the questioning voice with many hows and whats, and kind of really pushed us into challenging our perceptions and rethinking what we were experiencing and how we were thinking about it. So you were really an indispensable agent for us in that. And it was very great to meet you for that, and it's nice to have you here today, Isabel.
Hello, everybody. First of all, thank you so much for the invitation to be in this amazing committee. It was very challenging, but we will talk about that later. So now I will introduce my colleague, Silvia. Sílvia Leiria Viegas. She is an architect and a researcher. She was a postdoctoral researcher at the Center for Social Studies at the University of Coimbra, with the project in Chair 21, Social, Spatial and Housing Inclusion of Refugees in Contemporary Europe, Lessons from the African Diaspora in Portugal. This project was founded by the Foundation for Science and Technology, FCT, and she is currently integrating the Research Center for Arts and Communication in the University Algarve hub. We are in the same research center. It's a pleasure and a challenge to be a researcher with you. And there in the University of Algarve, she had another founded project. She explores the project Refugee Research for Post-COVID National Measures and Local Actions in the Algarve, a digital tour for access to adequate housing and living conditions. And she works in different layers and different communities, and her work covers architecture, urbanism, housing, migration, and more recently digital media at CIAC Research Center, and follows a multidisciplinary perspective and collaborative approach. Thank you. I pass you.
No? Yeah, okay. Thank you, Isabel, very much for your presentation, very long presentation. And thank you, Paulo, again, and deeply for your invitation. It's been a really pleasure all these 6 months, 8 months working with all of you, and being here is really a privilege. I really think this is a very important moment. But now I'm going to present Mira, and Mira was the beacon of it all during these 8 months, because we spoke a lot about the selection, and Mira was always trying to make sense of our discussions, but that's something for later as well. I'm going to present Mira. Mira is a PhD student in urban studies at Estonian Academy of Arts, but she will also be a teacher at the same Academy of Arts after September, I'm guessing. Her research focuses on the intersection of neoliberalism and far-right politics, particularly in translation to the physical landscape of urban spaces, as well as gestures of dissidents that challenge conventional heroic narratives. So you can see this is a very up-to-date theme that Mira is studying. Additionally, Mira is a board member of the Viennese activist initiative. I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce the name.
Westbahnpark yet.
Yes, but you can see why I cannot pronounce the name. Advocating for public space justice through performative interventions, and affiliated with the master's program on curatorial theory and practice at the Academy of Applied Arts of Vienna. Her work is characterized by exploring a diverse range of methodologies and modes of mediation, aiming to fragment and extend upon her research. Thank you, Mira.
Thank you, Silvia. And then just to round this up, we are completed by one more member, Anna Miguel Regedor, who will join us from Friday onwards. And Anna, I just also want to introduce her to you. She's a PhD student in human rights and contemporary societies at University of Coimbra. She has a background in human rights and democratization and law. And then her research focus is very much on kind of developing a critical prepositive intake on the right to immigrate. So she is coming from a very professional, theoretical perspective to also the things that we were discussing. She is working as a lawyer specialized on human rights. She's working for many NGOs, the UN, and then she's also a volunteer at European Lawyers in Lesbos, Greece. So that makes us all, 4 of us. And we were thinking, because as you might have gathered from the presentations about what we are doing and what we are researching, there is a strong focus on research within our group, which might at first appear a little bit as a surprise for 4 people coming together to form a selection committee. And there's also this kind of dimension of activism within our group, and we thought it would be worth to reflect a little bit upon what that means in terms of our positionality, in how did we talk about what we see, and how did we speak about what we thought. So maybe I can invite you, Isabel or Silvia, to start to formulate a few thoughts on what that means, your professional engagement as being part of a selection committee within an architectural film festival.
Well, briefly, as a researcher in digital media and feminist urban studies, my contribution and my reflection here is, as you said, as you mentioned, it was focused on the activism and also on thinking about how can the films selected and they can experience in a one way. Experience in the cinematographic and technical and that kind of topics, and for another another way, the message and the activism, how can these films dialogue with cultural, social and political and society issues. So these dynamics, how can they dialogue with the society? So our reflection, there was a lot of hours in our 8 months of collaboration, and it was very interesting because we had a multidisciplinary approach, different perspectives. We all defendemos. Support, inclusion, and social justice, spatial, social, and so. But we have different perspectives, and so the discussions that each film provoke in us, and we share in a safe space where we can share different perspectives, and in every discussion we learn something, and we learn something that can improve us as researcher. It was very, very interesting, and it was very also a challenge to understand different language, different ways of expression of different films, and there was a lot of important films that couldn't be here. We need more days to show the other films, and it was a challenge to understand. And to select the films that can share with us different ways of living, different ways of perceiving different realities, different perspectives, and in some way this activism also has to express and teach us like empathy. How different, because we have from different, how many countries did we receive?
42.
42. So there was also a situated knowledge from these different films that can contribute to a discussion. So the rationale that we try to align, they also dialogue between them. No? Pass to you, Silvia.
Thank you, Isabel. Yes, I'm going just to make a very brief statement about my own, how do you say, percurso, my own path, so that you can understand the way I see the world. So I come from African studies. I did my PhD at the same time as Paulo, and I studied Angola. And when I started studying Angola, I didn't know what I was going to find, and then it totally changed my way, my worldview, because I found a lot of struggles. It was 2012, and I was studying the way that the autocratic regime of Angola was addressing housing, and how people were resisting to a lot of evictions. And then in 2015, when I concluded my PhD on Angola, I shifted my vision to Europe, because I didn't want to go and live in Africa for personal reasons. And it was the long summer of migration, so-called long summer of migration, or the so-called migrants crisis in Europe. And I remember I was in the Netherlands at the time, and I was seeing all those people coming by boat and landing on European shores. And I thought maybe I can add something to the debate around this, because I have a different lens from the European perspective. So I was studying refugees in Europe, also always from the perspective of the right to housing. And I started working with refugees in Portugal, and I was there, like I collaborated with associations and feeling their struggles in everyday life, but also with other Afro-descendant communities that had arrived in Portugal in 14 years, and try to see how all these things would combine. Life took me to be part of some activist mobilizations, and I was there in 2017 when a lot of local associations went to the government and asked for the right to housing, and it changed politics, and it shifted the way the government addressed housing and the way we are now seeing how it is being addressed, because the governmental programs take a lot of time to be implemented. So what I'm trying to say is that I'm very interested in activism as a way of changing deliberation. How can social mobilizations trigger political change for the better and for the worse? And just to wrap it up, since the world is shifting from my perspective, into a very dangerous place, the idea of perceived threats and far-right movements which are rising, and hate speech and all those dimensions that are changing, very rapidly changing our world today, I also find that they can change politics in a bad way. So it's this struggle between, it's not between the bad and the good, but between different worldviews, that in a sense guide me for trying to address our choice, our common choice. So it was something that I was always trying to bring to the table for our debate, but also from the disciplinary lens of architecture. How do we see architecture within this framework? What can we as architects say about it? But most importantly for me is, how can we just shift a bit from the core understanding of what architecture can be, from being just another player in this immense table of power struggles?
Yeah, thank you. I think I wanted to add something that came to my mind also while Isabel was speaking, and I'm wondering if that's also something that maybe a few of you can relate to. I have this really, I'm getting chills from terms such as transdisciplinarity and those kind of things, because I do feel it's these terms that have been so overused to an extent that they're, but I have out, and they're just this patina that we attach on everything to give it a certain sense. But I have to say, and I wanted to relate it to positionality and kind of situating ourselves here, that I had a really liberating and almost emancipatory experience in that regard, because I do, while I have my troubles with the term of transdisciplinarity, I do believe that it needs a sense of kind of knowledge, maybe not production, but knowledge struggling through, for the lack of a better term, that can take part and exist off the plane of the institution. And I do feel within that frame of the film festival and kind of discussing these films through also our kind of lenses coming from research, we were able to really think about architecture in a way, or maybe more spatial production. I think that's more where what I would see in that as not being a trained architect. Spatial production off the plane of, you know, a social script and so on. And then maybe one more thing to add, that I do feel it's even more, and I will say this every time I will speak into a microphone, so I'm starting now with it. It's so great that so many filmmakers are here. Miki, I see you, Abdullah, Gustavo also. I don't know, I don't see so good today, so maybe I'm missing someone, I'm sorry. But I think that really is so amazing to us, because our conversation revolved around a specific language and knowledge and perspective and lens, and then having you here to kind of complement that from your understanding of film and working through film and thinking through film. I think that's really fantastic, and we are looking forward to all the formal and informal and public and private conversations we will have moving forward. But before we start that, maybe a few hard facts. It was already in between the lines. So we started this open call. The official program came together through an open call on the platform Film Freeway. That open call was open from October until September, and we received 100, I have to give you the dry numbers, 127 submissions, which amounts to 75 hours, 30 minutes, and 24 seconds of runtime. 42 countries, 9 categories. So just to say that out once more. And so we were standing in front of this digital mountain of screen minutes. And then I think we started a process of needing to find a common language of how do we approach this, how do we speak, how do we rate those things. And maybe someone of you wants to start to talk a bit about this. We started with setting up these categories, which I think weren't so important in the whole process, but they gave us this framework to think through those films. Maybe can I ask one of you to speak a little bit about that more?
So we try to make a list of topics that we could explore each film, so we can try to be more the less subjective, but have like a matrix that we can approach each film in the same. With the same values, with the same parameters. So we try we discuss a lot what we should evaluate. And we came to 12 topics, I think it was 12, regarding some are more technical, and others like cinematography, like the narrative, also like the message, and the cause, the activist cause behind. What else? The narrative. Well, some of them are more technical, and the others are more what does make us feel, the emotion that what trigger us and how does it feel us at the end, and also the message. Silvia, can you?
So I think it was our first real diving into because we started with 5 dimensions, I'm guessing, or 6, and then we thought it was too much, and then we turned out to have 12. So we just decided, no, it's not enough. So because we wanted to be fair, but we wanted to be fair, as Isabel was saying, but we also wanted to have a common ground so as to choose the films. I remember, from my perspective, I remember that pacing was something that we added because we wanted the films to transmit, the pace was something that was important for us, for the films to transmit a certain, I don't know, stillness or just something that was not that palpable. And another debate that was interesting for us was that storytelling and narrative, we decided that they were separate dimensions. It wasn't quite the same thing, but also value to the topic. It could be a political interest, or it could be an ideology, and of course it had to have the spatial dimension because we're talking about architecture. So how does space relate to ideology? How does space relates to stillness? How does space relates to emotion, deep emotional knowledge? We try to address dimensions that were not the typical dimensions related or most commonly related to architecture as a core discipline. So that was something that was very interesting because we decided, the 4 of us, that it was very important for us to have these dimensions. So we tried to follow them the best way we could, and we just watched the films. Mira would prepare a slot, and we would just dive in the films, and then we would have this 3-hour conversation, and we would take a long time to debate, to analyze. And I'm always saying that we could have a festival because there were a lot of other films that were also very, very interesting, and we could have done it, but...
Yeah, that brings me to something that I also wanted to put forward for us to reflect a little bit, because I feel very much that the selection of these 14 films that are part of the official program, 13 to go, 1 we saw yesterday, Mother City, is really much the expression of a specific moment, a moment in time, a moment of conversation. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on this kind of parameter of time and context relating to this selection, because maybe we can start to speak a bit about these films, and I can say this with an example. You see those films flying by. It's a bit too quick. I hope it doesn't disrupt you too much. Mayo, a film we will also see tomorrow. But I wanted to say that we have one film in the selection which is called Spider Son, a film about really rebellious courage, kind of the feminist uprising in the face of systemic discrimination, the state repression. But then we have a war being forged on Iran, happening just a few weeks or 1 week, I'm sorry, I don't have it precisely in my mind, happening after we make that decision. So I do feel that these films start to be charged with different meaning or take on a different meaning or message through the context and time that's happening. So I wonder if you also would want to reflect a little bit about this selection in moment and time and how these meanings transmit and kind of are have a living identity in a way.
I think, for instance, the film from Claudio Carbon, Mai, for instance, and I'm just stressing it out because I know the neighborhood, I know Katia, it was one of the neighbors that was part of the social mobilization from 2017, and it portrays a really important message from what's going on with access to housing in Portugal or non-access to housing in Portugal and the structural violence associated to it. So I guess that we chose films that portray some type of structural violence, and in a sense it's a global and a local dimension, unfortunately. So, and unfortunately the violence is not going away, so it can either escalate or be more invisible. So in a sense, we are seeing things that are addressed in the films escalate, and also we chose, for instance, apart from the quality of the film as well, of course, but Udo, we spoke about it, it was also a political choice for us to choose the poet from Gaza, because we could not, of course, under the circumstances, position ourselves in a different way. So I think that, in a sense, our choice also reflects our positionality as political beings in the world today, from a local perspective, but also a global perspective. So yes, I think it was our stance.
Yes, I think in the first moment, I think this crazy global context make us think about what the message that the films are going want to go through, and so this violence, this reivindication of spaces, and they went to our selection naturally, because there were the discussions that, and they are unfortunately still the discussions that we are going through, the war, the violence, the capitalism, the need that community has to make statements and try to have actions and to reivindicate the cities. So naturally, that was the discussion in the moment, and still the discussion now. So naturally, there was the message that we select. And also the borders, the spatial borders, and what brings us to the wars and to this territorial conquer and annihilate the other from the other side of the border, and the other as enemy, and the other, and also, for instance, touch me the films that. One specific, that one about the rape in the world. What's the name?
Bosnia-Herzegovina.
Silence of Reason.
Silence of
Yes,
Reason.
yes. It was a very tough film to see what these wars and the borders and territorial conquers make to the people, and the value of the human life. So also we want to make a message about how can we promote this discussion about empathy. So I think this was the most strong thoughts that we are thinking in the selection.
Yeah, just regarding the films that were not selected, but that in a sense they were thought-provoking, but most of, they just portray a certain condition or a certain dimension or a certain reality that in a sense could inform what this discussion that we're talking about. Silence of Reason was, apart from the rapes and the violence from a gender perspective, of course, and the war crimes, it had this very spatial connection. It connected deeply space with atrocity. So you can see how space develops its own role on the atrocities of war. And that, as an architect, for me, is quite important because there are dimensions, and also as a researcher, when you try to research something, you can see what the field whispers to you, and space whispers a different story from those stories that are told by person, because the person has its own interpretation, its own perception, but space has its own language, I would say. And in this particular film, Silence of Reason, space told us a very brutal story, and it was very interesting. We didn't choose it because there were others that we thought were more, or at least were that important. And also, may I stress some?
Go ahead, please.
Helps from the Tree was something that it really impressed me because it was from the border of the Iran and Iraq war, and it was about building prosthetic legs, wooden prosthetic legs. It was somebody who was how do you say, trying to make the bombs go. Dismantle the bomb. He was dismantling the bomb. In the process of dismantling the bombs in the border of Iran and Iraq, he lost his legs and his members. Still, he continued doing it. At the same time, he was building prosthetic legs, wooden prosthetic legs for those who also lost the legs. And it was about everyday life after the world totally collapsed in the region, and how people can still have a sense of life and dignity, and how he used his own voice to go to the international community and try to reach out for people not to produce more bombs and more weapons, unfortunately without success. And there's just another one that I would like to stress, which was Teen Angst. I don't know, it was from Ukraine, and I know you really enjoyed that one. I don't know if you want to talk about it, because it was about teenagers who...
It's just right there.
They left. They were not leaving Ukraine, but they were just. Mobility was very present because they were either still living in Ukraine or going to surrounding countries, and they were these young teenage Ukrainian girls. Just girls, weren't they?
9 of them, and basically it was also a co-authorship of the film, right?
Yeah.
They were all coming together and producing the film together.
Yeah, just to say that they felt hopeless after the war, and they were really depressed and anguished because they couldn't see no future, and most importantly, they were afraid of trying to envision it because they knew they could not, if they could die and not have it. So it was like a paradox. They wanted to have the future, but they couldn't allow themselves to have hope on the future. So it was very, and I'm a mother, and we don't need to be mothers to feel the pressure and the horrors that war can bring to somebody's life. So we had a lot of what I'm trying to say is that we had a lot of very, very interesting films that we cried. I can say that we cried a lot during because I wasn't expecting when Paulo invited me that I would see so many how do you say it, disturbing movies, and that it would relate to space. I would say space, and in this case is the digital space, and then we can somewhere in between our conversations build if architecture has a space in the digital space as well. So it's something that we can speak.
Yeah, I think these two films that you were speaking about, Silence of Reason and The Hopes from the Tree, is really two films that show how trauma persists in landscape and how materiality keeps on materializing trauma also. So I think there is these films that now I'm just trying to move the conversation a little bit towards the topic of the border, as this is also kind of the framing topic for the whole festival. And then I think we do have these films that are at the front line of geopolitical violence. We were already mentioning Spider Sun, a film from Iran. We were already mentioning Free Words, a poet from Gaza that portrays a poet in Palestine. We have Twin Fences, a film that will screen tonight at 9:15. But then I think there's also conversations that we're having. What kind of border do we feel present within, especially this election? I think it's a bit easier to speak about that. And I think there's this interesting mode, because there is this desire and need of wanting to broaden this concrete physicality of the border and not only think about this line that signals territoriality. But then again, I think waking up to news every day, it makes it so much more apparent that we have to think about these concrete lines that people draw on maps. And then for some they mean love, and for others they mean pure hate. So I think also the involvement of the nation state in that. But of course, more than that, also the border carries so much symbolic meanings, and that's also something that some of these films show. And I think I here, by the way, I'm just pointing to, this is still from Silence of Reason, which was also working with archive material a lot. And then these different kinds of borders that we see, I would share this reflection from my side that I think it also is tricky to see these kind of vast parameters and then project them into this idea of the border, because then you start somewhere and don't really know where you end, and then everything becomes a border. In a way, everything is a border. And I think that's also something, and I want to highlight it with another example of a film that we didn't include, but that's a film that really struck me strongly. There's still coming up. It's called People. I can't pronounce it. I need to read it from somewhere. I wrote it here. Biblocto. It's kind of a one film event. I don't know if the two of you remember that film, but I remember talking to you that I can't stop thinking about that film. And it's this one filmed event that is kind of almost in real time filmed, capturing these sea hunting people in northern Siberia. And I think it struck me so much because it was negotiating a relation of a community towards death. Something that in the way that I'm growing up or the way I'm socialized is something, there is a different or a distance towards death that's kind of something that's really present and really big, but you'd never touch it, if I can put it that bluntly. But the film really showed like these children playing with these dead mammals, and like there was a huge whale on the sea and they would just like throw their ball on the whale, and I was watching, was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. But I think I'm just speaking about this film because that's also the power of moving image. It creates these vast and deep emotions for you, I think. Something that we feel very strongly, and I hope that you also can experience this throughout the festival. But then you want to relate it to a topic and you want to make it work. And I think that's sometimes, at least for me, posed a difficulty in making a selection, because wanting to see the border and wanting to make it fit. And I wonder if also you have a film in mind that played into this wanting to make it part of it, that we didn't select in the end, because we thought today it's also a good moment to really highlight also films that are not there, because all the other ones we don't want to talk too much about them, and we rather want to invite you to see them with your own fresh eyes and experiences. So any films that you remember that were just sticking with you, but that we kind of couldn't make it work within the selection and within the theme?
I'm awful with names. I don't remember names.
We can help you.
There's one specific. There was as you mentioned, it was very interesting because our tentative to make this concept of border is when we want to select a film, it could be subjective, but at the same time, we agree that there are very different and a lot of borders. So there are not just the physical borders, but more symbolic borders, and always this difference between me and the other, and the way they create the border between us. And one specific, because my background in digital media art loves to explore technical and digital in a digital level. So one that I really enjoy, it was that one that the principal, the character goes to the street and starts to go to a digital place, and there a mix between the physical reality and this digital everything that happens in this mind. And I really, really like it because it was very experimental. I really enjoyed that, different places. And I remember some of you, I don't know who, but didn't really appreciate, but it provoked an interesting discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that was also interesting, at least for us, to realize what we understood as borders, and again the idea that the digital space is also a spatial space that we can use for architecture. But you were asking about I really like one, but from a very personal perspective, Wonder from Frederico Cordeiro Ferreira, which was like a time travel for me, because it was about, I don't know, it was about the 80s in Portugal, in northern Portugal, but so you could just feel the pace, the slow pace of when I was 10 years old or 12 years old, or so I kind of related to that. I kind of time traveled to my own personal childhood and adolescence. But there is one that I found fascinating, and we were talking about it. It was like a very, very short film about a chicken. And it was a chicken that during COVID times found a home in South Africa. I don't know if it was Johannesburg or it was in Cape Town. But it was a story of how the chicken was taken by a family or a girl who just collected the chicken. The chicken put it some eggs and developed her own family inside that period where during COVID times. And I find it fascinating. I really liked the film because it was like a metaphor for all that crazy period that we all experienced, and finding a secure place during very uncertain times, and also human, I don't know, animal empathy in a sense, and you couldn't be with other persons, but you could relate to animals, and in a sense also feel a sense of caring and loving and being able to develop emotional connections in a period where we all felt that we were totally isolated, or at least very much isolated from the outside world, without fear. And the freedom that that chicken had compared to all the freedom that we all lacked, it made me feel so good. I really loved the chicken. And I wanted to have a chicken of my own doing that. But we couldn't bring the chicken on board, so I hope she's fine.
Thank you. I also hope the chicken is fine. So we've been meandering now a little bit in what could have been. So maybe now, and also we're thinking that we could arrive back where we are now, and then send you off into also maybe more informal conversations, but also into the screenings that are happening today and tomorrow, sessions where we put these 14 films. I mean, we had the opening, I was mentioning this before, and all the other films are put together in sessions. And these sessions are not framed by country or framed by year of the film, but rather they're hinting at themes. I would say, I don't know if you would agree. Maybe themes is not it's not the right term. They are more, I think, wanting to discuss space as being socially produced, all of them. And we thought that it would be nice to share them with you, do that now, because this is also something that we want to propose to how these films come together. And maybe we can just read them out now and then have yeah, should we do that? Maybe Isabel, do you want to read them out? Or should I read them out? Okay, I just have to find them. Here they are. Okay, I read and then someone else can take over to speak a little bit more. So we now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more sessions, and I'm going to read these questions to you. So the first question: how do migrations transform social and physical spaces? Another one is: how do material conditions influence the dynamics of belonging and displacement? How can an intersectional lens help to decode structural violence? How is oppression and resistance reflected in everyday life practices? And lastly, how do cultural representations shape perceptions of time and space? Any more thoughts you want to add to this? Go ahead.
Another problem that we faced was how, after making the selection, the preliminary selection, how would we group the films, and how would we present them? And I agree with you, it was not about the theme, but something that, I don't know, but instinctively made sense for us. I don't know, I think it was kind of, it was not very rational, the way we put the things together, the films together. And then we tried to find a common ground amongst them by pockets, and we ended up with questions that related to the pockets that we were addressing. And I think that it was how the questions popped up, because we had to find questions that, for us who have seen the movies and those who are going to watch them as a group, would make sense to wrap them up.
Yeah, but I also do feel that there are propositions also in a way of viewing these films and also viewing the connection between these films, because I think you start to select films and then you select them for the film that they are, but then you put them together, and then I think there is also this urge of wanting that they come together and also speak between each other and kind of make, it's not about creating a bigger narrative. I think that's not at all the question, but I think they all do, depending on how they're shown together, react to each other, and then different things start to become more apparent depending on how we would kind of put them together. So I do think for me these questions they're really like about epistemology in a way. So how do we know what we know in a way? I don't know if you agree to this. I don't know if you agree to this, filmmakers. Yeah, please, Shumi, go ahead.
I'm just picking up on the last thing that you said about how do we know what we know, and I'm recalling, I'm kind of using my most teacher volume voice. I see, okay. Thanks. Just picking up on what you just said about epistemologies of how we know what we know, it was reminding me of a informal conversation we were having a little while ago about also the conjunction of films, right? Of what happens when we watch them together, but also what happened when you watch them together. And the fact that it's not just the experience of the film, but the reflections after that you shared with each other that produced a certain value for you as the jury. And I often find that, you know, in cultural programs, you're given the thing, you're presented the thing, and then kind of left with it. So I really appreciate, you know, this open discussion about your experience, but I'm wondering for us, who will be watching film after film, if there are some things that you can tell us about your discussions between you that actually revealed some of these questions of how do we know what we know and sharing perspectives, because, I mean, I wish I could eavesdrop on those conversations as well. Is there something that you want to share about how you spoke with each other? Also, the person who's not here, I forget her name, but
Anna.
Anna, that's right. So maybe you could describe a little bit some of your discussions and how they went in anticipation of our discussions and how they will go tonight and so on.
I remember that one of our worries was not to put two films that were very, I don't know, overwhelming together, or trying to separate films to have some space to breathe, I don't know, and just that they wouldn't overshadow each other, because it was important for us that films wouldn't overshadow. And that was a struggle, because we have very powerful stories being told here, and we didn't want one story to appear less than the other, just because there could be some comparison, and that was a struggle, I'm guessing. Something that we were tried to be careful about was like the statics of it. We didn't want use the statics of poverty or statics of violence or statics just like making a beautiful package out of horrible things. So we were careful about, tried to be as careful as we could be about making it, but we also wanted them to not only establish a dialogue between them within the session, but to, I don't know, just like to not make it better, but just to enhance some qualities. Like if some short film could be an opening, a good opening to, like a poetic opening to another story. And I think that's what we did with the butterflies.
The migrations, that's the session that's just coming right after.
Yeah, with, for instance, the next section, and the Strong Men of Burang. So we try to curate it like something in a sense, so that they would.
But I think it's also, I think intuition is a very powerful tool. And I do think that, and I think, Silvia, you have been mentioning this, there is a lot of intuitive way of wanting to relate those things to each other. And I think it's also daring to do it, you know, and not needing to, or trying to resist to have an argument for everything, but also, and I think that's what film allows us to do, going with an emotive response, or kind of also relating aesthetics. And I agree, it's not about aesthetics, just plain aesthetic reasoning, but I do think a lot of these decisions were also made by the way these films would make us feel. And I subscribe to everything that Silvia was saying before. Yeah, thank you, Shumi, thanks for asking. Yeah. Well, if anyone else was to ask, I said this before, will not put you on the spot. You can just speak out if you want to. But I also suggest that we could also wrap it up here maybe and just sit around here a little bit. We have, I think, 45 minutes, a bit more left until the next session starts. We will have Q&As also in, not the next one, but from the next one in all the sessions with the directors present with us here in Porto. And yeah, it was, I think for us, this was also a therapy session. You know, just, I mean, I think we could go on in reflecting about things, but it's just nice with a little bit of distance, come together, think about things, say them out loud, and then, Mickey, please go ahead.
I don't want to interrupt you.
No, I'm just rambling.
Okay. I just wanted to thank you for this sort of insight into your process and thinking, and because often, you know, as filmmakers, I was joking earlier this week, I spoke in a panel at the Encounters Film Festival, and I was saying, I think as Mother City, we can wallpaper a small cathedral with the rejections we've received and, you know, for funding applications and all those things. So you're constantly confronted with rejections, but you also have acceptances, and like here, for example, for which we're deeply grateful. But it's very lovely to hear you talk about your process and also reflect on some of those films that didn't come into the festival, because it's often not about the film isn't good enough, that's anything like that. It's just about how does it all fit together and is it right for this space. So I think that's, I'm just very appreciative of that. And then it made me think of something I went through in the edit with Khalid. So, you know, we would cut and there'd be the scene that I'd be very attached to, but we had to make the film shorter. And then, you know, and then there'd be a lot of arguments and backwards and forwards, and eventually the scene would have to go and I'd be very unhappy about it. And he'd say, but it's there, we've cut it. You know, it is there. It's in the DNA of the film. Even though it's not in the film, if we hadn't done this, then we wouldn't have been here. And so I feel in a way that's similar to what's happened here. Those films that you speak about now, even though they're not in the festival, they're here because they're in the DNA of the choices you've made. And that's really lovely.
Thank you so much for this. I think this is perfect, making sense of what we are trying to say or figure out ourselves. So thank you so much, Mickey. It's very generous of you.
Just want to share something that goes in line with you mentioned, that it was like a feeling about there are a lot of important films that stays outside the selection, but it was like we need to recognize the effort and the time that they took for a lot of filmmakers, directors, actors, a lot of players, a lot of people that were involved in such amazing and important films that unfortunately they couldn't be present here, but somehow we felt like it's not fair, but but they, as you mentioned, in accordance in this line of dialogue, or in this line that we want to make a reflection, couldn't be here. But it is important to acknowledge that huge effort that was made.
Yes, and then I'm just going to add by quoting you. So these films are still with us. Even everything that's not here is also somehow part of what we are and how we come here together. So I think that's a beautiful thought to end this conversation with. Thank you so much, and see you throughout the festival. See you at the next screening or the one after. And it was a pleasure to do this together with you.
Same to you.
Thank you.